Tonight, the cover-up at Ground Zero.
They told us that, look, you're going to be a part of history being made. We didn't realize that we were going to be a part of all this death.
You have to go through something real bad to find out what radiation does to people.
This land in the Nevada desert was America's ground zero in the Cold War. America's testing ground in the struggle for nuclear supremacy.
We were living the American dream, what we thought was the American dream that turned into a nightmare.
In 1950, the United States government decided, for reasons of secrecy and to save money, to test atomic weapons on American territory. An Air Force range 75 miles northwest of Las Vegas became the Nevada test site. Over the next 13 years, at least 124 nuclear devices were exploded here into the atmosphere. And then the tests continued underground. The government tested the effects of nuclear explosions on buildings, on animals, on human models. But real people were affected.
And all of a sudden, this big flash would wake you up. I mean, it was so bright. If you were laying in bed, somebody put a spotlight right in your face. That's what it was like. And then it wouldn't be very long until you heard the earth rumbling, and you could hear it coming, and the aftershock of the bomb.
For Martha Laird, this used to be the drive home. But more than 30 years ago, she moved her family away from here because she feared the atomic fallout that was dusting their ranch, just 80 miles north of the test site. She'd lost her young son to cancer.
I hate to come back over here anymore. That's,
too many memories. It brings back too many things.
yeah.
For Martha and her daughter Beverly, this trip back was a way to face the tragedy that changed their lives. In 1955, Martin, who was then 6, was just beginning his second year of school. He came home one day, unable to walk. He was diagnosed with leukemia and died 10 months later. The doctors said radiation from the bombs could have been to blame. The old family ranch is abandoned now, left to the past that haunts it.
Sad mess, isn't it? I don't believe it. It should have been my brother's place, you guys.
After Martin died, Martha Laird lost another son. He was stillborn with deformed legs. Another daughter has thyroid problems, and Beverly has had numerous operations for skin cancer.
Oh, I can't believe this. This is awful.
Yep. Nothing's the same.
That was my room.
By 1958, when this family left, the Atomic Energy Commission had conducted nearly 100 nuclear explosions on the Nevada test site.
Well, let's close. I can't take it anymore.
The family still has the photographs of the fallout clouds as they came in straight over the ranch. The exposed film had to be kept in the deep freeze to protect it from radiation.
We lived off the land. Our kids drank all of our milk because we were never warned about it. The kids drank out of the spring. They played in the water. And when you would get the radiation, and they'd say, well, it was just like, oh, an X-ray. Okay, how long does it take an X-ray? Just like that, an X-ray is over, right? We would be under those clouds some days all day long.
Martha Laird's ranch was directly in the path of the prevailing wind which carried the fallout clouds from the test site. Downwind, across her farm, to the north-northeast. There lie the ranches and towns of central Nevada and southern Utah, where St. George is the largest community. During the testing, about 25,000 people in all lived downwind of the nuclear explosions.
It took a while for us guinea pigs in here to realize what was happening to us.
Quentin Nyson, a merchant in the little town of Washington, Utah, just across the ridge from St. George, was the mayor in the 1950s.
We thought it was patriotic to stand by the government, what it was doing. We didn't think too much about the effects of the bomb because we didn't understand it that well. We was just trying to sift it out.
As mayor, Nyson was invited down to Nevada to watch the testing in person. He took home movies to show the family.
This is the residue from all of that mushroom stuff that was going up in the air. That was it floating out from the bomb.
These big rolling red clouds would come on, just big tumbling red clouds, just like big thunderheads. And those were, of course, the death-dealing clouds that we didn't realize then what they were doing to us.
Elmer Pickett has lived in St. George since he was a boy. Like all the towns in southern Utah, a predominantly Mormon community where people do not smoke or drink. And few of them got cancer until the 1950s.
I have lost 14 people of immediate family. My wife, my sister, a niece, my grandmother, mother-in-law. My wife's first symptoms were in late in '59. We thought first it was flu, and they discovered that she was full of lymphosarcoma, known as Hodgkin's disease, which is radiation-induced type of thing. I had 6 children at the time, and she was so desperately trying to train her real young daughters on how to take care of things. She just seemed like she was obsessed almost in getting those things done. And then just before Christmas, all at once, she came out with full-fledged leukemia, which took her within a week. She was 38.
The decisions about the bombing in Nevada, the ultimate decision maker was the Atomic Energy Commission. This was a 5-man commission appointed by the president.
Stuart Udall, former Secretary of the Interior, has spent decades arguing those decisions in court as an attorney for the people who've come to be known as Downwinders.
They had a kind of broken record, and it said the Atomic Energy Commission says there is no danger. And they put it on the radio and films, and this was their theme. And they, in effect, said, we are the experts, we know what we are doing, and there's no danger. And this was said in an absolute way. They didn't qualify it.
The government message was so clear that upwind of the test site in Las Vegas, the atomic blasts were regarded as entertainment, and bomb watching became a morning sport. The shots only went off on days when the wind was blowing away from Las Vegas. The men who ran the testing program lived even farther away at the Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico. The director of the lab at the time was Norris Bradbury. That's him standing in the middle. He's an elderly man now. He's 84, but he still supports the choice to use Nevada.
You had to test somewhere. And because I don't think you'd want to, at least the military people didn't like the idea of using a bomb without testing it. The reason for using Nevada, of course, was it would fall out, drop out of the atmosphere before it got to civilization. Nevada was as convenient a place as you could get to. We took all the precautions we know how to take.
But government documents, which are now declassified, show that while Nevada was chosen because the wind blew over a sparsely populated area, scientists were not sure of exactly where the fallout would be, or how dangerous it would be to humans.
When they made the original study, this is a meeting that lasted a day or two at Los Alamos. One of the participants at that time, he was there as a consultant, was Dr. Enrico Fermi, one of the great names in terms of the atomic age. And the memorandum that they prepared, he said that the data we are relying on, data of weather and fallout, was rather inexact. And in effect, we don't really know whether it's going to be safe. He said that right at the beginning, before they started.
Minutes of the Atomic Energy Commission meeting, February 1955. Commissioner Libby.
People have to learn to live with the facts of life. And part of the facts of life are fallout.
Commissioner Straws.
It is certainly all right, they say, if you don't live next door to it.
Commissioner Murray.
We must not let anything interfere with this series of tests. Nothing.
My brother and I were outside on the swing in our backyard, and we saw this great big ball of red flame come up over the mountain. We didn't really talk about it. It wasn't something we were really preoccupied with.
When Claudia Peterson was growing up near St. George in the 1950s, decisions about national security seemed far away. And the testing was just a part of daily life, even when men with Geiger counters came to school.
When it came to me and the Geiger counter went off, one of the gentlemen said, well, it means you've had dental x-rays. And my mother was a nurse, and I knew what an x-ray was, and I knew I'd never had a dental x-ray. I went home and asked her, and she said, no one. I said, oh, someone said I'd had dental x-rays. But it was just passed off as no big deal. A lot of people still believe they're okay. For a long time, I thought I was okay, and we would be okay until something hits your family or something happens.
So it was not for some years that Downwinders began to connect the testing to what was happening in their lives.
I can't even describe the heartache a parent feels when they're losing a child.
When Turning Point continues. While the government assured residents the tests were safe.
There is no danger.
What officials were doing privately to protect themselves and their own families.
He said to me, look, this is a serious situation and this is not a good place to be, and you ought to go somewhere else.
Sometimes I feel like maybe I blame everything on it, but it's really hard to see and to know what I've read and heard, not to blame everything on it.
It cannot be absolutely proven that the testing was to blame, but Claudia Peterson has lost 3 members of her family to cancer. Most recently, her 6-year-old daughter. Her father died of a brain tumor. Her sister of malignant melanoma, leaving 6 young children. Then leukemia struck Claudia's daughter, Bethany.
I thought the hardest thing I'd ever go through was when my father died. I didn't think I would ever have to go through anything as painful as that. But I was wrong. Our little girl Bethany got sick, and we went to Salt Lake, and she was diagnosed with stage 4 neuroblastoma.
There has been no definitive research so far proving that genetic damage from radiation exposure can be passed on from one generation to another. However, some scientists are now convinced.
The first thing I asked him was, is it from the radiation? Is it from the nuclear testing that we were exposed to? I said, could you prove it wasn't? And he said, no. And I knew right then, I just knew that that's what it was from. Because of what I was exposed to and what my husband was exposed to as children.
The cloud all went over Utah. I remember flying over St. George. They're getting a lot of radiation down there, is what I thought.
Colonel Langdon Harrison was an operations officer with the Air National Guard during the testing period. His squadron was assigned to get samples of the atomic clouds.
The mission was to fly through the blast clouds after a detonation of an atomic weapon. And the purpose was to gather the atomic radiation, the plutonium, whatever came up from the cloud. It would go in those clouds, and sometimes radiation would be very, very high, running up 60s, 70s. One time, 150 records of radiation showed up on our dosimeters.
Dirty Harry was the first real bad one that we were aware of. It was in 1953. And that one pulled up a considerable amount of debris, and huge, huge clouds came over, and we really got dumped and dusted.
The community of St. George was directly in the path of the radioactive clouds that Shot Harry created. Harry was one in a series of tests in the mid-50s that turned the Downwinders' suspicions about radiation danger into conviction. The test took place a little after 5 in the morning on May 19th, 1953. The Atomic Energy Commission's own chief medical officer had recommended that the size of these explosions should be no greater than 12 kilotons. At this level, the release of radiation would be acceptable. The public record now shows that Harry was 32 kilotons. Dirty Harry.
St. George, Utah. Population 4,500.
The Atomic Energy Commission felt obliged to produce a film about Harry in order to calm any fears. They recreated the day of the test.
Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt this program to bring you important news. Word has just been received from the Atomic Energy Commission that due to a change in wind direction, the residue from this morning's atomic detonation is drifting in the direction of St. George. It is suggested that everyone remain indoors for 1 hour or until further notice. There is no danger. Parents need not be alarmed about children at school. No recess.
Public Health Service radiation monitors were stationed in downwind communities on test days. On the day of Shot Harry, Frank Butrico was in St. George. He appeared in the government film checking cars with his Geiger counter. The story he tells of what happened the morning of Shot Harry is not in the film.
I happened to look at my instrument and noticed that in the center of St. George, Utah, where I was located, the instrument was reading well over 300 to 350 milliroentgens per hour, which was just about the range of the instrument. Obviously, these were higher readings than the maximum permissible levels established by AEC on a national basis.
Butrico notified the test site, but his records show almost an hour passed before he was told to issue a warning that the residents of St. George should take cover.
It wasn't too much of a surprise that not everybody had the word. Cars were still on the road within St. George. People were still walking on the streets. And most distressing, when we passed a grade school, we noticed that the children were still on their morning recess, the teacher having not received the information about taking cover. I received instructions to be sure and discard my clothing and to be sure and keep showering until I reduced the amount of radiation that was on my body. I should point out that I did ask whether we should be doing the same thing in an announcement to people in the community. And of course the answer was a resounding no, because this would create a panic situation.
When the invisible cloud had passed, the total amount of radiation deposited on St. George was far from hazardous. Then you may ask, why were the people asked to stay indoors? For a very simple reason. The Atomic Energy Commission doesn't take chances on safety. It is the...
I happened to be in that film, and a lot of the local people, they used all local people, showing how exciting it was to watch the fallout and trying to depict the safety of everything. Ironically, a good share of the people who were used in that film have died from cancer since that time.
Among them, police officer Earl Cox, merchant Tony Reynolds, Sheriff Roy Renoff.
What was going on Harry Day? A cover-up. That's what was going on. And they were just determined, as far as I could tell, and all that I read, that under no conditions, no matter what happened to people, no matter how heavy the radiation, Don't admit that anybody has been harmed. Don't admit that the radiation doses were large enough to harm human beings.
Radiation is not a good thing, but I don't know of any death that's been caused by it. Now, I can't prove, nor can anybody else, that somebody who died at 80 would have lived to be 82 if he hadn't been exposed to a little radiation.
Defenders of the testing, Norris Radbury of the Los Alamos National Laboratory is certainly one, argue that the exact level of danger from radiation is not known.
They can't prove it was caused, I can't prove it wasn't.
But what of the evidence that sometimes the fallout was higher than the official safety standard?
Sometimes you get fooled. The bomb is different than you expected, that's why you test it.
In 52 and 53, the whole thing escalated until they were exploding test bombs on low towers that were sucking up enormous amounts of earth that were 3 and 4 times larger than the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs. This was a turning point in terms of human health, because the bigger the bombs, the more the fallout. And to give you an idea, the radiation began to show up in the milk in St. Louis. It showed up in the wheat fields in the upper Midwest and so on. There was a rainout near Schenectady, New York. We're all downwinders.
After every one in this series of tests, radioactive fallout was recorded at various points all across the United States. For each shot, a picture of the cloud's path. Taken all together, the data shows a pattern of fallout that reached almost every corner of the nation.
It upset a lot of people. That's when people really begin to wonder about just what is this?
A few years after the 1953 test series, Quentin Nyson and others felt pretty sure they knew what this was. By then, cancer was striking in the most brutal way at the very young.
Well, you look at the background of the Red Hills there in St. George, that's for
Quentin Nyson's nephew, his sister-in-law, Helen's son, Sheldon, died of leukemia.
Here we come. Now, there's Sheldon with the cowboy hat on and Bob on this side.
They both got cowboy hats. Sheldon had the light ones, Bob had the dark ones.
Sheldon died in July 1959, just 3 weeks after his 13th birthday.
You say Sheldon, he died in 59, but did we have many deaths prior to him? And that's when all of it started, didn't it? Kind of boomeranged with.
I can't remember of anybody that I knew of that died with leukemia, yet our little school had 75 kids, and Jessalyn Turner died just a few months before Sheldon, and they both had leukemia. And there's a little baby out to Enterprise at the same time died, and then Carlene Haven in St. George died about the same time, and really.
Well, Dr. Joseph Lyon, epidemiologist, University of Utah, he just studied death certificates. By isolating this area where most of the fallout fell, he turned up evidence that there was an increase in childhood leukemia of about 3 times or 4 times what you normally would expect. They were killing children. They were killing children. And these were kids that were 5 and 7 and 12 and 14. And when you saw the tragedy in terms of the families, it sort of broke your heart.
Between 1956 and 1961, in these small communities alone, 14 children aged 15 or younger died of leukemia.
I was probably the first one that I know of in that area to protest the fallout. And then others picked it up, and they were doing the same thing.
After her son Martin died of leukemia, Martha Laird, who was then Martha Bordoli, moved to northern Nevada. The old ranch near the test site that she left behind appears often in her paintings. She did not leave quietly.
I sent out petitions to all the congressmen, and I sent one to AEC, and I think it was Strauss. His letter was the one that came back and told me it was a small sacrifice to lose a son. Dear Mrs. Berdoli, this letter is in response to the petition regarding nuclear weapon testing on which you were the initial signer. Former
President Truman said,
the dangers
that might occur from the fallout in our tests involve a small sacrifice when compared to the infinitely greater evil of the use of nuclear bombs in war. Sincerely yours, Louis L. Strauss, Chairman, Atomic Energy Commission.
And this I don't understand. It wasn't his sacrifice, that was my sacrifice. And if they had told me it was going to be my sacrifice, I sure as hell wouldn't have had him there.
Nobody consulted me on the debris fallout in Nevada. But I don't see why you're asking me these questions. I don't care to discuss this.
To this day, Norris Bradbury does not wish to discuss whether people downwind should have been warned about possible danger. He and others believe the testing was in the national interest. However, Bradbury's own relatives lived downwind. His son's family lived in southern Utah at Zion National Park. And his former daughter-in-law, Ellen, remembers that her father-in-law did warn her.
When we moved to Zion, I was pregnant with my second child. And he came and suggested that it wasn't a very good place to stay if you were pregnant or had small children because of the fallout from the testing.
I don't remember anything about that. I don't remember doing it. I don't think I did it, but maybe I did.
At first, I don't think I really understood what he was saying. And he said to me finally, clearly enough, look, this is a serious situation and this is not a good place to be, and you ought to go somewhere else. Then I understood that it was quite unusual and important that he would have broken this, kind of code and said this to me. He didn't want to have anything go wrong with one of his grandchildren.
Remember, people like Claudia Peterson were not warned.
Every week I go to the cemetery and put balloons on Bethany's grave because there's nothing else I can do. A couple of people have said to me, well, when are you going to get over this? And, I said, well, I have to do something. Hi.
Today, what Claudia Peterson does to keep this issue alive is to spend time with people whose parents and grandparents also were not warned. On this day, Cassie Delgado's daughter Chelsea was dying of a brain tumor, with only days to live.
Chelsea, hi. Oh, she's cold. Chelsea. She's just beautiful. You look a lot like my little girl did. She got sick too, but she's okay now. She went to heaven. What the Department of Energy and the government, their decisions they've made have devastated our lives. My life's been devastated and it'll never be the same. And it wasn't my decision. People making decisions for us that are destroying our lives. And we have no say.
The morning after this visit, Chelsea Delgado died. She was 4 years old. Four years ago, Congress allocated $200 million in compensation for those Congress believed had been affected by the radiation. But the Justice Department imposed rigid restrictions on who would qualify, and only half the money has been dispensed. When we come back, American soldiers who were ordered to witness the testing.
Turning Point, the cover-up at Ground Zero, continues in a moment.
As far as the test is concerned, you'll be okay.
Turning Point will continue after this from our ABC stations.
The big thing that upsets me more than anything else in this whole thing is that they deceived the men that were out here. They showed that we received less radiation to keep from following up on our medical treatment and follow up on our compensation and so forth.
Reason Wareheim last saw the Nevada desert near the nuclear test site in 1953 when he was a first sergeant in the Army, assigned, along with more than 3,000 other soldiers, to participate in one of the nuclear detonations, shot Simon. A cross-country trip last summer brought Wehrheim back to what remains of his old base headquarters on the test site, Camp Desert Rock.
All along here was just rows of tents. This place held about anywhere from 3,000 to 6,000 men in tents. There was tents went all the way down these hills.
Over 60,000 troops were assigned to the test site throughout the atomic testing. At Camp Desert Rock, they were briefed on their mission to observe the atomic detonations, to help the government learn how troops would react in a nuclear war.
You are here to participate in an atomic maneuver. This is not a haphazard maneuver. The radiation level may be high, but if you follow orders, you'll be moved out in time to avoid sickness. Well, that's the story. Don't worry about yourselves. As far as the test is concerned, you'll be okay.
We went out that way. From here, it took over an hour to get to where Shot Simon was.
Simon went off on April the 25th, 1953. Wehrheim and his men were taken to trenches within 2 miles of Ground Zero. They were told that after the blast, they should move in the direction of Ground Zero to simulate an attack on enemy troops.
We were told to sit down in the bottom of the trench and put our head down, cover our eyes, and the thing went off. First thing you experience really is a light that's just so bright. You can actually see your bones and your fingers, it's so bright, with your eyes closed and your hands over. And then you feel a vacuum. It just feels like something like you're being sucked up into a vacuum cleaner. It just presses your whole body. We got out of the trenches and we started walking forward.
The troops had been told Shot Simon would be 23 kilotons. The government now admits it was at least 43. Wehrheim is one of those atomic veterans who felt the need to stay on the government's case all these years. He and his lawyers say the radiation from Simon caused him to lose his teeth, develop cataracts, bone and muscular ailments, cost him 1 lung to cancer, and made him sterile.
I started talking to other atomic veterans. And all these guys are suffering for the same kind of things. And when you get 200-300 people together, they're all having the same problems. And the only thing they have in common is an atomic bomb. Then you start thinking.
The only veterans benefit Wehrheim gets for radiation exposure is $65 a month for sterility. The government won't give him more, even though Congress ordered that atomic veterans with some typical radiation-induced illnesses should get compensation.
If they receive more than 5 rims of radiation. So then they hire a company that says, oh, but these men didn't receive but 1 rim, 2 rims, 3 rims, never more than 3.
A map that Wehrheim says he carried on the day of Shot Simon shows his unit's route of march in a straight line toward Ground Zero. Later, the map was redrawn by the government contractor hired to estimate Wehrheim's radiation dose. The new map showed the unit marching in a curved line, putting the troops further from Ground Zero.
It was all a lie.
Atomic veterans first brought suit in 1983. They won in lower court, but lost on appeal. Of the men named in the suit, only Wehrheim is still living.
It was our duty to be out there. But on the other hand, I think at least we owed it to the men that were out here to have taken care of them after they were out here.
Like the atomic veterans, Downwinders also brought suit against the United States in 1979. Their attorney, Stuart Udall, asked the government to admit its mistake and settle out of court.
Quite frankly, I'm shocked that the government's position is that, well, go prove it. We have no settlement to offer you at this time.
The federal district judge in Salt Lake City ruled for the Downwinders and against the government. Quote, "The court finds that defendant failed to adequately warn the plaintiffs of consequences from exposure to fallout radiation, and that such failure was negligent." Again, the lower court ruling was overturned on appeal.
The government of the United States took the position that since this involved national security, that the government could in effect do what it pleased, and no matter how much evidence we assembled, that the government is immune. This goes back to the law of King Henry VIII, I guess, that the king can do no wrong.
Today, despite the fact that the Clinton administration has urged the entire government to be completely open, the Justice Department has gone to court one more time, in this case, to fight a lawsuit by the men who actually worked on the test site itself.
Mine is the underground department, mining department. They used the tunnels for the explosions for their atomic bombs. And some of those tunnels, before I got there, was already had shots in them. They were radiated, they were hot.
Keith Prescott, who is battling cancer, became the first test site worker to file suit. These days, he can only watch as workmen prepare the foundation for a small prefab house where he's moving to be next door to his son. He has not been able to work since 1967, when multiple myeloma forced him to quit his job digging the test tunnels.
Precautions was negligent. There was no washing facilities in there to wash. Before you ate your lunch, you took your lunches inside and just sit them there. And another thing was your work clothes. You'd wear those work clothes, take them home with you, the family wash. It makes me real mad to think that if they knew anything about the radiation, why they would let us take our dirty clothes home from work and wash them with the family wash.
What could be a landmark legal case got underway today in federal court in Las Vegas.
It was not till this winter that the test site workers' case finally went to trial, 14 years after Keith brought suit. The moment brought lights and cameras, but only the promise of more argument.
It's a travesty of justice, in my view, that it's taken 14 years to get here, and it'll take another 5 if the government...
Stuart Udall and the other attorneys are asking for a settlement of $15 million for more than 200 workers now included in the class action. Of the men whose cases are being argued in court, again, only Prescott survives. The rest are represented by widows and other family.
They keep dragging it out, and one day they won't have very many people to fight with. What are they trying to do to us? Outweight us? Maybe we'll die, and they won't have to pay us off. But
Keith Prescott could have filed for compensation under a law passed by Congress 4 years ago, but only if he agreed to give up the lawsuit.
I don't think it was my place to say, yes, I'm going to, and forget about the trial. It's been too long, too hard fought. I understand mine is a case that that's going to represent the rest of the people, and so you know, it'd be nice if you could have a little bit of money, and just, I never had any, so I don't know how it feels. But I don't want to accept something and be sorry, and all those other people that probably don't have as much as I have.
And what I lived with for 3 years.
How it turns out, you just have to wait and see. A lot of people say that's all they want is an apology from the government.
As the trial began, what the test site worker lawyers got from the government was tough courtroom tactics. 126 boxes of documents, the Justice Department's evidence, arrived only at the last minute. Delivered according to the rules, but too late for real consideration.
This lawsuit is like a guy on a bicycle with a rifle against a tank. Here's the tank. And the day before the trial. You know, soldiers in a war sacrifice their lives for their country. Civilians, which we're dealing with here, to ask them to sacrifice their lives, particularly if they didn't know they were in danger and the government lied to them, that's something of another character to me.
You live this every day. You know, I mean, you don't forget things as you go along. A lot of people say, what difference does it make? It makes a lot of difference because they can turn around and do it again.
The object of the atomic bomb is to stop wars. And if you killed a few people in the civilized world to save 10 million people in wars, you might regard this as a good bargain.
I think if it was just me, after all these years, I'd say, forget it. But I had a friend of mine. He fought for years and years and years over this thing. And when he died of cancer, he was laying in the hospital, and he looked at me and he says, "Where I am, whatever you do, don't give up this fight. It's just not right. It's just not fair." And believe me, I don't intend on giving up this fight. Because it's just not fair.
Not much left, is there? I doubt if it'll ever get a historical marking.
On this whole issue of radiation, the government seems divided. On the one hand, the Energy Secretary, Hazel O'Leary, is busy declassifying reports on radiation. On the other hand, the Justice Department is seeking court costs from some of the veterans who sued the government. People you've met tonight are not divided by any means, and for them it seems that money is no longer the issue. What they want is what it is sometimes hardest to get from a government: a simple apology.
By secret antiperspirant, strong enough for a man, but pH balanced for a woman. Once again, Peter.
Whole hour. And here are some of the stories we intend to tell.
They were the girls next door.
The homecoming princess who sang in the church choir. Remember her?
Yeah.
But they turned into the Manson girls.
I ran after her with an upraised knife.
Now, 25 years later, they break their silence
I began to stab her.
and reveal the power Charlie Manson held over them.
I never told anybody to do anything other than what they wanted to do.
This is a normal part of life. This is supposed to happen.
The turning point for 20 families desperate to adopt, duped by a lawyer who played a...
It begins on a weekly basis, Wednesday, March the 9th at 10 p.m. That's our broadcast for tonight. I hope you'll join us next time. I'm Peter Jennings. Good night.
For a transcript, send $7 to Journal Graphics, 1535 Grant Street, Denver, Colorado, 80203. Turning Point is a presentation of ABC News.
The American.
We can't undo it. What can we do to move forward? Where do we go from here? How do we take what we've learned and protect the next generations from this?
Wright's father, Arthur Bruin, died of cancer related to atomic testing, and she's dedicated her life to fighting the battles he couldn't. Because of Wright and a lot of people like her, St. George now has a cancer treatment center, and some 1,500 downwinders have been compensated. Wright says it's a start, just a start.
Did this affect my genetic capability? Is this affecting my children and grandchildren, which we know it is? Where do we go? Is this illness radiation induced? Is this? We need to research it.
You can't see the mushroom cloud over St. George anymore, but it's still there.
Sprinkled throughout Utah's state capitol building are a series of plaques and markers memorializing important events in Utah and American history. The Downwinders hope one day to have their own marker. If not here, then maybe in southern Utah. But they really don't need a memorial, because the pain and suffering they've endured for 2 generations now has already earned itself a firm place in Utah history. Rod Jackson, News 4 Utah.
Now, ironically, those who once fought the government have now become a part of it.
The Downwinders, long a critic of radiation policies in the state and federal governments, now sit on the state's Radiation Control Advisory Board.
Many southern Utahns were undoubtedly watching tonight's program with both interest and sadness, including this group of viewers in St. George.
2 of them are joining us now live. Penny Shelley is the executive director of the Washington County Travel Bureau, and Randy Lovell is the executive director of the Dixie Center. Both lived in the area during the open-air testing, and we thank you very much for joining us tonight. What did you think of the show? Was there any solace in having your story finally told?
Good evening. I think it's important to, first of all, not minimize the story itself, but rather to concentrate on the fact that the area is safe for visitors to come to at this time. Since 1981, this area has been tested continuously, and I know that over the years, every time a broadcast has been done about the Downwinders, it seems to dredge up a lot of fear that this area is not a safe place for people to visit.
Penny, I understand you get a lot of weird phone calls from outside of the state. Can you relate a few of those to us?
Oh, yes, we certainly do. There have been instances where when a broadcast is done, people will call our office and ask if we grow vegetables in our garden, can we eat the vegetables? Do our children glow in the dark? And obviously, Randall, when people visit our area, we want them to leave with a glow, but that's a happy glow, not a glow of radiation.
What are your children asking these days when they see things like this on national television?
Well, of course, they're very curious about the events that took place in the early 50s and the 60s, and I think that there is some merit to the complaints that you've seen on TV tonight. I think in no way should we ever minimize the stories that we've seen. I actually applaud the courage and the dignity that these people have used in sharing their story with us, and frankly, I'm confused on what to tell my children because I'm not sure what the entire story is.
We have to leave, but we want to get Randy in this. It makes me mad every time I watch these stories. Does this make you mad still?
It does a little bit, but I think the thing that we need to remember is that if we can get to the bottom of it and we can get the truth out, then that's what everybody would like to have. We would like to know the extent of what may still be there, but we also want people to understand that it is monitored on a regular basis, that it is safe to be here. People are flocking to southern Utah to live and to visit our area in record numbers. We've had over 300 conventions here in the area in the last year, and we want people to know that we would love to have them come. We want them to be a part of what we have here, but yes, there is some answers that I think still need to be made.
It is a wonderful part of the state, and Randy and Penny, we thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Utahns aren't alone in all this. Charges today that the government failed to inform thousands of U.S. workers that they have been exposed to toxins like asbestos, dioxin, and uranium. A complaint to the Clinton administration says 170,000 workers haven't been warned of cancer risks. It says this is an unethical cover-up that may keep these people from getting early treatment that could save their lives. Money, power, influence. Just how much impact do they have up on Utah's Capitol Hill?